It's Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by the Governor of Alabama. His name is Robert Bentley. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Like many states in the Union, Alabama is facing a bit of a budget crisis, a budget deficit. You have been looking at ways to try to somehow bring in new revenue to a general fund budget that's in deficit by about $250 million. Talk to us about your efforts.
Well, first let me say that this is the worst budget deficit that we have had probably since the Great Depression. And it has been very difficult. Every year we have tried to shore up the general fund with one-time money, but we don't have that anymore. We do have enough money coming into our overall budgets because most monies that are related to the economy, which is doing much better right now, goes to the Education Trust Fund.
And that's what's confusing to so many folks in Alabama. The economy's doing well. Unemployment is down.
It is.
One would think that with an economy on the mend, that more revenue should be coming into the state naturally.
Well, that is true, and it should be. Unfortunately, the monies that come from new jobs and the creation of new jobs, and that's what we've been doing since I've been governor, is creating new jobs in the state. That money all goes into education because it's income tax, sales tax, use tax, utility taxes. All of those taxes related to new jobs go into education. 32 small taxes fund the general fund, and it does not grow with the economy.
So let's talk about that disparity. We know, as you suggest, the general fund is separate from the education fund, two different budgets. You've signed the education budget. Not many states do it that way. Only 3 states do it the way I just described, separating out the general fund from the education fund. So is it time to look at unifying the budget?
I certainly think it is time to look at that. In fact, I suggested that the first year I was in office, and the legislature was not quite ready for that at that time. But I suggested that, and I think that we need to look at some form of that. I'm not saying that we should totally combine the budgets, but we should bring over some growth money out of education, like the use taxes.
Right.
We should bring that over and let that fund the general fund.
But why not unify them?
Well, it's simply because if you unify them, we are having a continual increase in the amount of money we have to spend for Medicaid and for prisons and things like this. That will take money away from education. And so the education community, they are against that.
Well, one could argue we're all in this together.
We are.
You know,
and
Alabama is all one great state. We need to be there for each other, all different constituencies.
You're exactly right. Now, we're not overfunding education. Don't let down. But we have adequate funds. And in fact, this year, I just signed the Education Trust Fund budget. This is next to 2008. This is the largest education budget that we've ever had. And so we have adequate amounts for education, but it's not an exorbitant amount. And so we can't give a lot of that money. And so if you combine the budgets, all you're doing is just moving money around, and you're going to take money out of education.
But what about, at least for this year, borrowing money from education? As you may know, general fund deficit $250 million. Education fund surplus.
All right. Well, let me tell you the problem. What you're doing is really it's a shell game. You're talking about doing a shell game, and what we really need, we're the lowest tax state in the country, and I don't want us to be the highest tax state in the country. I want us to keep our taxes low, but taxes need to be fair. 58% of the corporations that do business in Alabama pay 0 state income tax. These are large corporations. Because they have loopholes, and we need to close those loopholes.
So you have called to increase taxes. It's a bold move.
I have called for some increases of fair taxes to supplant the money that, as we move growth money over from education into the general fund, to make it grow just like education does when the economy does. You have to supplant that, and you have to take care of that with some revenue and with some taxes. And that's what I've suggested.
So you suggested $541 million in new taxes.
But let me tell you what else that does.
Please.
There's about $285 million that we need really to keep our heads above water right now. The rest of that money is to pay back debts that I owe that were created in the early 2000s from previous administrations. I've got to pay those debts back. I have to pay the federal government back. We have money that's owed on our rainy day fund that was borrowed out before I became governor.
Think about The pensions, I mean, the unfunded liabilities of state
Yeah.
pensions.
All of those type things we have to pay back. But there are things that we have to pay back right now. And so the rest of that money is to pay debts.
Let's talk about your friends in the legislature. It's a Republican legislature, so arguably the GOP team should be on the same page.
That's right.
At this stage, though, it seems as if the Republicans in the legislature on the House side will consider new revenues, new taxes. On the Senate side, they don't seem quite as willing. Is that fair?
That is fair. The House has really stepped up, and they considered some new tax revenues, and they considered some new taxes, and I want to applaud them for that. Then the Senate leadership said, no one over here is ready for new taxes. Well, that's really not true, because I have talked to really almost every senator. And there are a number of senators, Republican senators, who are willing to vote for new, fair taxes like I have proposed.
Well, has one considered speaking with your friends on the Democratic side of the aisle?
I have.
And then combined them,
I have.
Presumably they would be willing,
Yes.
with some of your friends on the Republican side.
Let me say this, it's not fair for the Democrats to take the brunt of all of this.
Kind of you.
It's really not.
No, that's very kind.
It needs to be a unified effort.
Right.
We're a state that's Republican and Democrats.
Right.
And in fact, the money that I'm trying to raise helps many of their constituents more than it does those who vote Republican.
So the Senate Pro Tem, Mr. Marsh, has been a strong advocate of creating revenues in a different form.
Right.
He's looking at gambling.
That's right.
And his sense is, let's look at the surrounding states. The surrounding states allow gambling, and Alabamans are moving from to those states to bring in revenue. Why don't we have revenue generated for gambling in Alabama?
All right. Well, let's talk about gambling. First of all, there is not a single gambling piece of legislation out there that will put one penny in the 2016 budget. I have to worry about October the 1st, 2016, or 2015.
Right.
That's when the budget starts. So there is not a single legislative thing that
helps us today.
Today. And so we've got to have money today. And so I am never opposed to the people voting on issues. If it's a fair vote, I've never seen a gambling vote that was a fair vote, to be honest with you. No.
Meaning in the legislature, or meaning statewide?
No, I'm talking about statewide.
Okay.
I just think that. But let me say this about, especially the lottery. People
Please.
say, let's have a lottery. Well, we're a small state. We're surrounded by lotteries. People are not going to come into Alabama to play the lottery. It's not going to generate nearly the money that people think it will generate. And it's like a leisure suit. We're about 30 years behind. And so there are only 5 states that don't have a lottery.
Right.
We're one of them. And we are not going to generate a lot of money with the lottery.
So as we conclude, sir, what is your sense of the end game here?
I believe that there is so much animosity towards the end of the session.
Right.
That we're eating our young. We're destroying it. So what they need to do is go ahead, do what they're going to do, get out of town, and then I'm going to call them back in special session.
Special session. I mean, that's a significant statement.
Well,
and
I think that's the only way to solve this. Isolate the issue, get all of the other issues out of the way. Isolate just this issue dealing with the general fund budget, and I believe that we will get it solved.
His name is Robert Bentley. He is the governor of the great state of Alabama. My name is Brad Pomerance. I want to thank you so much for joining us on Charter Local Edition.